Welcome to Influential Women of Washington State. I'm Katie Hall. Dr. Traci Pierce, as Superintendent of Lake Washington, the third largest school district in the state, shares her insight into creating dialogue between school administration, teachers, parents, and students around safety, school shootings, and parental engagement.
As I think about really what's the role of an educator, we're in the people business, right? So we are, ultimately our goal is to graduate our students ready for the future. And so, for us that means ready for the next level of education and training. It means ultimately ready to take on a job that provides economic stability and to be a contributing member of the community and have a sense of civic responsibility and giving back. So ultimately that's what we're trying to accomplish, and it takes a lot of people to do that. Primarily, our teachers are the people who, of course, are interacting with our students in our curriculum on a day-to-day basis. And so from a system perspective, as a superintendent, what you really are responsible for doing is ensuring that you've got the right people and the right programs and the right systems in place to ensure that what's happening in the classroom every day for students is ultimately producing that result that we want. And then there's a lot of work that comes through working with our elected officials, whether that's the board of directors or our state legislators, or working to advocate for school issues at the federal level.
It sounds like it's very encouraging to be in your type of position.
It is encouraging. It's, it can be stressful and overwhelming at times, but at the same time, every day when I get to go into a classroom of kindergartners or interact with our seniors, for example, you remember what it's all about and why you do what you do. In fact, I just have to share that yesterday I had a group of ninth graders from one of our high schools asked to interview me and
nice.
Our director intervention programs, because they were doing a documentary for their class on homelessness. And so they wanted to learn about what we knew about homelessness in our school district and what we do as a district to help homeless students. And so it's that kind of experience that you get to see the result of your hard work, and here's a group of students who are really passionate about a topic. They want to learn more. They wanted to know what they could do as students to help, and part of that's getting educated and informed about issues affecting the community, and then trying to figure out what it is they can do about that issue. So it's that kind of thing that really keeps you going, I think, as an educator.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's great to hear like the positive things that are happening in your schools. I want to be able to sort of change the conversation just so slightly here. There's been a lot happening in our schools, and I talked to you about me graduating in 2000 from high school. A lot of these kids in high school now, they were born post 9/11. And so you hear about all of the shootings and the violence in the schools. Talk a little bit about that type of responsibility.
Yeah, that's probably the thing that weighs most heavily on all leaders, I think, in education is what do we do, and how can we do everything within our power to keep our students safe at school, especially as the climate changes, and every time a tragic situation happens, kind of brings all of that to the forefront, and everybody's anxiety is raised, our students, our staff, our parents, and in fact, just this week earlier at our board meeting, I did a pretty extensive report on our approach to safety as a school district, because of course we are working on safety, and we have plans, and I could talk for the whole time about everything that we're doing and planning to do, which was part of this report. But every time something happens anywhere in the country, it raises a lot of questions, and so we like to, ensure that we're taking that opportunity to provide information to our families about what we are doing. And one of the things that's challenging about that particularly is all of the safety measures require resources. And as a school district, we are fortunate in that we have local levies, for example, that fund many of the people and the facility enhancements that we are in the process of implementing today. The challenge is that's not something necessarily that is, well, it's not something that's funded by the state or funded through federal dollars. So each individual district is really left up to determining what and how, what they can do and how they can improve safety given the resources that they have. So the whole resource issue in terms of, equity across our state and across the country really plays into it, unfortunately as well. And then of course we've got lots of students and parents really passionate about doing whatever they can to advocate and get involved to help, make change, because everybody can agree that we want to make sure our kids are safe every day at school.
Right. It's a whole different conversation. It's not just about equity of education anymore and access of education.
Right.
We're talking about safety, just
That's
simply
right.
being able to go to school and to know that you're coming home from school.
That's right.
I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So
Sure.
I remember being in 11th grade, and then like one of the first shootings that resonate with me was in Colorado. And that was devastating. I mean, I remember that was life-changing. And then I really didn't hear about many more, for quite some time. And so what would you say, now I'm a mother and about to be a mother of two, and I'm not afraid of many things, but I am a little nervous about sending my 3-year-old and my new baby that will be here pretty soon to school.
Right.
What do you say as a superintendent to parents like me?
It's tough, and I can only imagine what that feels like as a parent to know that this has happened anywhere in the country, and that fear that comes along with what could possibly happen to our to a student. It's a challenging question because what I can say is that we are continuing to do in our district, and I know other districts as well, everything that we can that's within our control and within our power to be able to ensure student safety. And that comes through social emotional supports and counseling staff and social workers, ensuring that our students' social emotional needs are met. There are students struggling with all sorts of issues, and as a school district we want to make sure they're supported, and then there's the physical safety of buildings and implementing measures that increase the actual facility safety itself, and then there's partnering with our local law enforcement and communities. So we have a comprehensive emergency management plan. All of our schools have a school safety plan and incident command system. We've got school resource officers that support our schools. Not all of our schools at every level, because again, it's a resource issue and a partnership with our local jurisdictions. But I can point to many, many things that we are doing and implementing. And then there's all sorts of things that are beyond our control. And that's where it gets hard. If people are asking for, a guarantee, can you guarantee? Sometimes that's a question that I get. Can you guarantee my child's safety?
You can't. Nobody can do that, though.
Yeah, and that's, and even if we have every safety measure in place at a school, with schools out, students are going to the library, they're going to the store, they're going to out into the community, and it's an issue that we're going to have to continue, I think, to work together as a community to try to figure out, what are the causes, what are the supports, and how can we work together to create a safer community, because we've got students for a portion of the day.
Yeah, that's
and before
true.
they come to us, they're at home. And when they leave us, they go home.
And that was my next question. You led me right into that. Like, what are the roles of parents in this epidemic that's happening?
Yeah, I think it's critical. There's I'm not sure who said this or who to attribute the quote to, but parent is the child's first and best teacher, and so what happens at home, and that relationship between parent and child and what parents are teaching their children and the values that parents are teaching their children is critically important. And of course, as a school system, we want to partner with parents. And so, if we can work together and reinforce the kind of messages and values and all of those things, at the school and the home, then we're going to be able to help shape, children together. But it really is a partnership.
The partnership. And so, how do you have these real type of conversations in the not only in the schools, I would say in the community? How do we start those real partnerships from your perspective, at
Sure.
least?
Yeah. Well, I think we're continually dialoguing with parents, both from the district level and the school level. So we've got lots of ways for parents to get involved through PTSA and different committees and so forth in terms of how we adopt curriculum and those sorts of things. So there's ways for parents to engage in the decisions that are happening at the district level and the school level. Again, whether it's through PTSA or all kinds of different systems that a school has, we want to ensure that parents are engaging. When it comes to particular issues such as this, one thing that we're doing right now is planning some community forums around safety. So a place to have some of these conversations and answer some of the questions that our community has. So those are in the works right now. We have 3 different cities in our district that we work with in terms of jurisdiction and law enforcement. And so we're working with our city partners to put on these forums so we can have some of the dialogue that you and I are having now because there's probably more questions than answers at this point, but to have the dialogue and to talk about how we can work together as a school system and parents even better and help improve safety, I think is obviously a really important conversation that we want to have.
And then how do we include the student voice in this with the dialogues? Are you all thinking about that piece of it?
Yeah, of course, I think, for high school students, you have to think about what's developmentally, appropriate in terms of engaging students in these kind of conversations. Certainly, I think at the high school level right now, those dialogues are happening
Anyway,
as
they're doing it anyway. They're doing it
yeah,
on social media.
exactly.
They're doing it. Yeah.
And our principals right now are working, especially they're working with parents, and then at our secondary schools with our students as well, having some of the conversations about there's a lot of energy right now, understandably, about this issue and the issue of school safety and ensuring that student voice is heard, and they want to know how can they help affect change. So there's a lot of planning and discussion happening at the schools right now to help students kind of channel, what can they do in terms of writing letters to legislators, in terms of, there's all sorts of things that they can do inside the context of the school. They're really learning opportunities that help students learn what it means to be a contributing member of a democratic society, and how do you get your voice heard, and how do you get your voice to the people who can make the change you're looking to affect. So
even at the large schools and small schools, do the superintendents ever have an opportunity to all come together and have this type of dialogue?
Yeah, we do actually. In fact, in the Puget Sound region specifically, we are all part of what's called the Puget Sound Educational Service District. That Puget Sound ESD serves all of the local school districts in the area. So once a month, all the superintendents come together and meet together.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great. Together with the superintendent of the ESD, and these are the kinds of issues, all sorts of educational issues. We share what we're doing in our districts. We oftentimes come together to advocate on a particular issue. To the state legislature. There's a lot of collaborative work that we do, and I'm really fortunate. We're really fortunate to have really outstanding superintendents in this area, and so I've got a lot of great colleagues that I get to work with.
so much of the gun violence we see here in the Seattle and larger King County area is young people. Yeah. It's juveniles and also just over 18 young men shooting at each other by and large. And we've learned so much about what's going on with young people. We've learned so much about how they mature and when they're able to, sort of master their emotions and make good decisions, brain development, and the fact that you're really not making totally dispassionate decisions until you're over the age of 25 and
or 45.
Yeah, in some cases never, but for most people. and then there's the you allow guns into the middle of that, yes. And we don't have the kind of early interventions with kids that would help them to have healthier families. It's all of a piece. It's public health, it's support for families, it's hope and a future and education and jobs. And there's a lot of work going on in this sector, in this county, and I don't want to sort of get too wonky about it, but we've gotten a little bit smarter about putting investments early on in families' lives and children's lives. There's an initiative called Best Starts for Kids, and it goes from pre-birth all the way up through communities and adults. But this is what we have to do, and it's hard because prevention's hard. It's really hard to know when you've made a difference, but you make a difference for the people that you touch. And so I think that that's one of the hopeful things I see to get at this issue that you're raising that is so real.
The steps are all linked. We also just passed in this state a rule barring suspension of kindergartners. And as a physician who works in a community of color, the disparity in the number of Black 4- and 5-year-olds who are suspended and expelled starting there and then continue to be expelled, and the naming of them as unwanted, as potentially violent, as threatening, that is part of this conversation as well. And so I am glad and I am sad that we needed legislation to say that is wrong.
And it starts with the parenting too, and advocating for your kids. My daughter has a lot of energy, as you know, and
good energy,
absolutely good energy. And
I'm going to work for her someday.
Yeah, you are. I think we all are. Awesome. I think we all are. She has so much energy. But I remember dropping her off at a play care center in Bellevue, and they were like, "Oh, KJ, you know how she is and she acts crazy." I said, "Don't say that about her." And I said it right in front of her. I said, "She doesn't act crazy." I said, "She has a lot of energy." Yes. I said, "And there's nothing wrong with that energy." And I thought it was very important for her, that 2-year-old, to see her mom advocating for her in front of her, that no, you're not going to call her that. They're words. But those kids hear those words and it spirals in their mind. And I think even hearing like a bad kid, you have to be very careful. So I find myself now actually correcting people. Like, no, that kid's not bad. How's that kid bad? They're only 3.
Right.
How do they know that they're bad, right?
Yeah.
It's just maybe as adults, we need to unlearn the way we're trying to teach them to be, because maybe we're the problem, right? And so when you think about that, not to take it off of I think that we all have to unlearn. Talk a little bit about some of the unlearning that happens.
Oh, I think that's really, really true. And I think that's part of the process of then relearning how our language is better and more aptly really lifting up the amazing potential of women and of communities of color. I would just love to also, just as a point in the conversation, not the whole conversation, to acknowledge that numerically, and I think in a societal impact, even in terms of our collective souls, the street violence from guns is much more impactful issue that we don't talk about. I love and I hate that we're going to get serious about gun violence issues because it's seen happening in these incidents in schools, which are horrible. I feel bad even as a pediatrician saying this way, but you have cities where the street one-on-one, one-on-two violence with guns is, and often in communities of color, and not just Chicago, all around. That is a societal issue that I'm almost sad that we don't pull the whole conversation together when we talk about this. I don't
That's
know if
a good point.
The acute gets the attention, the chronic doesn't get the attention.
Correct, and there's something societal about that chronic, right? That is I'm gonna.
No,
I'm
no,
gonna
no,
listen
no.
more, but,
Let's go there.
you started to.
Yeah, no, let's go there. That's a good topic.
Yeah,
I mean, being
I
from
agree.
Detroit, that's something I grew up with. So it's like it was just a norm, right?
Right.
It's just like it was
Right.
normal. Like, okay, so out of all of my 6 siblings, which one of us is going to make it to 18?
Right. Who's going to be in jail? Who's going to be?
Who's going to be in jail? Who's going to end up dead? Who's going to make it, right? All of us aren't going to make it, right? And so, no, that's a real topic. I think we can touch on that first, and then we can go into some of how, because it starts there, and that's how it ends up.
And it's not
in these
just
other
that, you know,
areas.
we talk about the opioid epidemic.
Yes.
It's really when that crossover into white society that becomes now a topic we are going to take on, and we're
Yeah.
going to call it something almost more like an illness, right? We use epidemic when it was crack or when it's something else.
Just bad
Then
communities,
it's
yeah.
just those people doing bad things, and so this is a recurring
Yeah.
dialogue that our society we have to pause sometimes and
Yeah.
say, yes, this is horrible, and this bigger picture also needs to be talked about.
Right.
Can I ask a question that sort of connects the things that we're talking about, which is, Ben, you talked about when it was shooting in the streets, it didn't get the attention. I'm wondering also, because is there also a race piece to this that
Absolutely.
more, you know,
Yes.
that
Yeah,
we need to
absolutely.
focus on that it, because it was noticed that when it was a white person shooting, they started talking about mental illness and all of this stuff. You know, it's the same thing you were talking about with drugs.
Yeah.
So there's that underlying thing that always comes into play. But the other piece of polarization is also that it is seen as either gun control or
Yeah, there's no
tackling-
middle ground.
It's like no, this is not either or. We have to deal with both of those
Right.
issues, and we have to deal with the issue of the video games being too violent. But all of those pieces have to be tackled. We tend
And
to
then
have to
movies
separate
and
them
movies,
out.
what kids see on TV, right? All of that stuff really matters. And being a parent that's knowing in a few years that my kids will be in school, I don't know if I want my kids going to schools. Just being honest, looking at it. And I was a person that was very involved in high school and very, very involved in school. Now, who wants to take that away from their kids, right?
Yeah.
And I am also a parent that is very much looking at getting a gun as soon as possible to be able to protect my family. And we're looking at that. And I'm not saying that I'm a part of any particular group, but I'm looking at what's happening collectively, but I also have to look at, okay, if something goes down at the same time, I need to be able to protect. We have daughters, and we have to be able to protect our family too. So these conversations are happening, right, behind closed doors, and you probably won't expect that out of me. But yeah, I want to get a gun, a rifle. I want to get a few different items.
I'm so glad you say that, because I have to unpack my own, like, you know how my bias is layered on bias, and sometimes I think I'm thinking something generous, and
Yes.
it's actually bias. So an example of that is I live in this sense that if we had a big gender shift, if predominantly women were in power at many different levels, I have a bias that we would not be having the same kind of gun violence problem. And then you were saying this is helping me also realize, like, that is also a biased perspective is somehow like there's a gentler, less gun violent world just automatically arising from shifting the power structure.
It's very interesting because in education we talk about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And what we find is that when we use tools that are useful for students with vision impairment or listening impairment or any of those things, we actually come up with tools that helps the whole classroom learn better. So doing that, embracing and being inclusive is beneficial to all of society.
It's interesting. I never ascribe to the rising tide lifts all boats. I think that's a huge American fallacy that leaves a lot of people sunk. I am intrigued by the idea of focused universalism, that really addressing some of the most egregious injustices actually increases and improves justice for all.
Thanks for joining us in exploring what it takes to lead a school district. We hope you are moved and inspired to be engaged with your learning community. Join us for future episodes of Influential Women of Washington State to hear more discussions from extraordinary women. Until next time, I'm Katie Haw.